The USS Helena's radar operator stared at his screen in confusion as mysterious signals appeared 40 miles northeast of Guadalcanal. Commander Robert Morris studied the strange returns on the radar scope, watching signals that pulsed rhythmically, appearing and disappearing in patterns that defied explanation. What appeared on their screens that November morning would have sounded like science fiction to most naval officers, yet it represented the most sophisticated naval deception ever attempted. 8 hours later, Admiral William Bull Halsey received an urgent intelligence report revealing that Japanese submarines had deployed an elaborate trap using coordinated underwater lighting systems designed to guide American task forces into pre-positioned minefields and submarine wolfpack. The mysterious radar contacts were the electromagnetic signatures of this revolutionary deception operation. By late 1942, the Pacific War had become a deadly chess match between American industrial might and Japanese tactical innovation. Japan, facing overwhelming material disadvantages, had turned to increasingly sophisticated deception tactics to level the playing field. Operation Kitsune, named after the mythical Japanese fox spirit known for its cunning, represented their most ambitious naval deception. The operation exploited a critical vulnerability in American naval doctrine. U.S. task forces relied heavily on radar for navigation and threat detection in the vast Pacific. Japanese engineers had discovered that carefully positioned underwater strobe lights, synchronized with radio transmitters, could create false radar signatures that appeared identical to enemy ships or aircraft. By deploying these phantom signals along anticipated American shipping routes, Japanese forces could shepherd entire task forces into kill zones where submarines and surface raiders waited in ambush. The stakes were enormous. American losses in the Guadalcanal campaign had already reached unsustainable levels. If Japan could systematically destroy American naval forces through technological deception, the entire Pacific offensive would collapse, potentially extending the war by years and costing hundreds of thousands of additional lives. What Admiral Halsey didn't know was that salvation would come from an unexpected source. A 23-year-old Navy electronics specialist who had spent his childhood building radio sets in rural Iowa and whose unconventional thinking was about to save the Pacific Fleet from systematic destruction through technological innovation nobody else understood. The intelligence reports arriving at Pearl Harbor throughout November painted a terrifying picture. 3 American task forces had mysteriously deviated from their planned routes in recent weeks, sailing directly into Japanese ambushes. The USS Juno had been lost with all hands. Task Force 67 had suffered devastating casualties near the Russell Islands. Each time, American ships had followed what appeared to be legitimate radar contacts, only to discover too late they were chasing phantoms. Captain James Richardson, Chief of Naval Intelligence, declared the situation impossible. Radar systems didn't lie. These contacts that American ships were tracking were real electromagnetic returns, not optical illusions or equipment malfunctions. Investigation teams sent to analyze the disasters found no evidence of equipment failure. American radar systems were functioning perfectly, detecting genuine signals that simply led nowhere. Japanese submarine logs captured later would reveal the sophistication of Operation Kitsune. Teams of underwater demolition specialists, working from specially modified submarines, had deployed networks of synchronized lighting systems across key strategic choke points. Each installation consisted of powerful strobe lights mounted on the seafloor, connected to radio-controlled timing mechanisms that could simulate the movement patterns of ships or aircraft form. The system's genius lay in its exploitation of radar physics. The strobing lights created electromagnetic disturbances that registered on American radar screens as solid contacts. By varying the timing and intensity of the flashes, Japanese operators could make these phantom signals appear to move at realistic speeds and in coordinated formations. To radar operators aboard American ships, the false contacts were indistinguishable from genuine enemy vessels. Previous attempts to counter Japanese deception tactics had failed completely. The Navy had tried radio silence protocols, but ships still needed radar for navigation in the vast Pacific. Alternative routing proved ineffective because Japanese intelligence accurately predicted American movements, positioning their phantom light networks accordingly. Increased air reconnaissance couldn't detect the underwater installations, which activated only when American ships approached within detection range. The problem seemed insurmountable through conventional means. American naval doctrine assumed radar provided accurate information about enemy positions. If that fundamental assumption was false, if Japanese forces could systematically feed false information into American detection systems, then the technological advantages that were supposed to win the Pacific War became liabilities that led American sailors to their deaths. Electronics specialist third-class Tommy Chen had been trying to get someone to listen to his theory for 3 weeks. The son of Chinese immigrants who owned a small radio repair shop in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, Chen possessed an intuitive understanding of electromagnetic phenomena that formal Navy training hadn't provided to his superiors. He'd been building crystal radio sets since age 8 and had an almost supernatural ability to diagnose electronic problems by sound alone. During the morning briefing aboard the USS Enterprise, Chen approached Lieutenant Commander Phillips with his analysis. The Japanese weren't creating false radar contacts, he explained. They were creating real electromagnetic signatures that mimicked ship movements, but the sources weren't ships. Phillips barely looked up from his reports, dismissing the idea as science fiction nonsense. Chen persisted despite the dismissive response. Intense underwater strobing could create electromagnetic disturbances that register on radar scopes exactly like ship signatures, he argued. But Phillips had no patience for theoretical discussions from enlisted specialists, especially ones whose ideas challenged fundamental assumptions about radar technology. The rejection stung, but Chen had expected it. Navy hierarchy didn't encourage theoretical discussions from enlisted personnel, particularly ones whose ideas seemed to violate basic principles. Growing up in his father's radio shop, Chen had encountered every type of electromagnetic interference imaginable. He understood how multiple signal sources could interact to create phantom readings on detection equipment. During his training at Navy Electronics School, instructors had been impressed by Chen's ability to troubleshoot complex problems, but they'd also noted his tendency to propose unconventional solutions that violated standard procedures. His background made him uniquely qualified to understand the phantom contact problem, but also made his superiors dismiss his insights as amateur speculation. The breakthrough in Chen's understanding came during off-duty hours when he gained access to the Enterprise's radar maintenance logs. Studying the technical specifications of the mysterious contacts, he noticed patterns that others had missed. The phantom signals appeared in clusters, moved in precisely coordinated formations, and always led American ships toward areas where Japanese submarines were later detected. Most tellingly, the signals disappeared completely during severe weather when underwater visibility would be compromised. They weren't trying to fool American radar, Chen realized while studying the data late one night in the ship's electronics workshop. They were feeding coordinated electromagnetic pulses into the detection grid to create false movement patterns. Armed with his analysis, Chen requested another meeting with Lieutenant Commander Phillips. This time, he brought detailed charts showing the correlation between phantom contact locations and subsequent Japanese ambushes. Phillips reviewed the material skeptically before rejecting both the theory and any proposed solutions, leaving Chen to wonder if anyone would listen before more American sailors died. Chen's solution emerged during a routine maintenance check on the Enterprise's secondary radar array. While calibrating the equipment, he noticed that different radar frequencies produced slightly different readings when scanning areas where phantom contacts had previously appeared. The insight struck him immediately. Genuine ships reflected radar waves consistently across all frequencies, creating stable signature patterns. while artificial light sources produced irregular electromagnetic disturbances that varied with frequency changes. Working secretly during off-duty hours, Chen began constructing a prototype frequency comparison device using spare parts from the ship's electronics workshop. The concept was elegantly simple but technically complex. By monitoring radar returns across 3 different frequency bands simultaneously and displaying discrepancies that indicated artificial signal sources, operators could identify phantom contacts in real time. The technical challenges were formidable. Chen needed to synchronize multiple radar receivers, develop filtering algorithms to isolate signal irregularities, and create display systems that radar operators could interpret quickly during combat operations. His improvised laboratory in the Enterprise's lower decks became a maze of jury-rigged equipment, modified oscilloscopes, and hand-drawn circuit diagrams. Lieutenant Sarah Nakamura, a communications officer who had overheard Chen explaining his theory to fellow enlisted men, became his first ally among the commissioned ranks. Unlike her colleagues, Nakamura had studied electrical engineering at Stanford before joining the Navy and understood the theoretical foundation of Chen's approach. The frequency analysis concept was sound, she told him, during a clandestine meeting in the ship's communications center, but he would need official support to access the equipment necessary for proper testing. Nakamura agreed to help Chen refine his prototype and document his findings in technical language that senior officers might take seriously. Together, they spent weeks creating detailed schematics, mathematical proofs, and operational procedures for the frequency comparison system. Nakamura's engineering background provided the theoretical rigor that Chen's intuitive insights lacked, while Chen's practical experience with electromagnetic phenomena solved implementation problems that pure theory couldn't address. The first successful test occurred when mysterious radar contacts appeared northeast of the Enterprise's position. Chen's prototype device immediately detected frequency inconsistencies that identified the contacts as artificial. Traditional radar showed what appeared to be a Japanese destroyer formation moving toward American positions. Chen's frequency analyzer revealed the signatures as coordinated electromagnetic pulses originating from stationary underwater sources. Radar operator second-class Mike Rodriguez watched Chen's device expose the phantom contacts with amazement. "Those weren't ships at all," he whispered, as the frequency analysis clearly distinguished between genuine electromagnetic returns and artificial signals. But proving the concept with improvised equipment was different from convincing Navy leadership to adopt revolutionary new technology during wartime operations. Lieutenant Nakamura understood they needed a dramatic demonstration to overcome institutional resistance. They needed to catch the Japanese in the act, she told Chen, not just detect their phantom signals, but prove conclusively that following traditional radar guidance led to ambushes, while frequency analysis revealed the deception and saved American lives. Chen's first official demonstration ended in disaster. Lieutenant Commander Phillips had reluctantly agreed to observe a live test of the frequency analysis system during routine patrol operations near the Solomon Islands. When phantom contacts appeared on radar, Chen's device correctly identified them as artificial electromagnetic sources. Phillips, however, interpreted the inconsistent readings as equipment malfunction rather than proof of Japanese deception. The demonstration had backfired spectacularly. Instead of proving his theory, Chen appeared to validate concerns about unauthorized modifications to critical navigation equipment. Phillips declared that Chen's contraption was interfering with their radar systems, creating false readings on top of false readings. This was exactly the kind of amateur engineering that got ships sunk, he declared, ordering the equipment dismantled immediately. The failure stemmed from technical problems Chen hadn't anticipated. His improvised frequency analyzer was generating electromagnetic interference that contaminated nearby radar displays. The device worked correctly in isolation, but when integrated with the Enterprise's primary radar systems, It created feedback loops that made all readings unreliable. Lieutenant Nakamura faced her own professional crisis. Her association with Chen's project had damaged her reputation among senior communications officers who viewed her collaboration with an enlisted specialist as inappropriate fraternization. Captain Morrison called her to his quarters for a pointed discussion about maintaining proper hierarchical boundaries and understanding the difference between theoretical possibilities and operational realities. The second test attempt produced even worse results. Chen had modified his prototype to reduce electromagnetic interference, but the changes introduced new problems. The frequency analyzer now operated silently without contaminating other systems, but its readings were so subtle that radar operators couldn't distinguish between genuine anomalies and normal signal variations. During a training exercise involving simulated enemy contacts, Chen's device failed to detect artificial signals that he knew were present. Radar Chief Petty Officer Barnes confronted Chen after the failed test with brutal honesty. The idea might sound good on paper, but it didn't work in the real world. Sometimes the simple explanation was the right one. American ships were getting ambushed because Japanese intelligence was better than anticipated, not because they were using phantom lights to control radar systems. The failures were crushing Chen's confidence and destroying his credibility among the Enterprise's crew. Fellow electronic specialists who had initially supported his unconventional approach began avoiding association with what appeared to be a hopeless project. Even Rodriguez, who had witnessed the prototype's early success, expressed doubts about continuing the unauthorized experiments. Chen's personal notes from this period revealed his growing desperation. The frequency variations he had detected earlier couldn't be reproduced consistently. Maybe he was seeing patterns that weren't really there. Maybe the phantom contacts were just equipment malfunctions after all. He was starting to think Phillips was right about amateur engineering creating more problems than solutions. Lieutenant Nakamura faced a career-defining decision. Supporting Chen's project further would likely result in official reprimand and damage her prospects for advancement, but abandoning the research felt like betraying both scientific principles and the American sailors whose lives depended on solving the phantom contact mystery that was systematically destroying American naval forces. Admiral William Halsey's staff meeting at Pearl Harbor addressed what they called the phantom contact problem with growing urgency. Intelligence reports indicated that Japanese submarine attacks had increased dramatically in areas where American ships had detected mysterious radar contact. However, when Lieutenant Nakamura submitted Chen's frequency analysis research through proper channels, the response was swift and devastating. Rear Admiral Thompson, Chief of Pacific Fleet Operations, declared that the enlisted man's theory represented dangerous thinking that could undermine confidence in their radar systems. They couldn't afford to have crews second-guessing every radar contact because some electronic specialist thought he'd discovered a Japanese superweapon. Thompson's concerns reflected broader institutional fears about unconventional ideas disrupting established procedures during wartime. Captain Morrison escalated the situation by filing a formal report questioning Nakamura's judgment and Chen's mental stability. The report, classified as concerning unauthorized technical experiments, described Chen's frequency analysis project as an example of how enlisted personnel with insufficient education could develop elaborate theories to explain problems that had simpler solutions. Morrison recommended transferring both Chen and Nakamura to shore duties to prevent further disruption of shipboard operations. The resistance intensified when Chen's research reached the Navy's Bureau of Ships, where senior engineers dismissed his frequency analysis concept as fundamentally flawed. Dr. Harrison Clark, the Bureau's chief radar specialist, provided a scathing technical assessment declaring that the physics underlying the specialist's theory were impossible. Underwater light sources couldn't generate electromagnetic signatures strong enough to register on military radar systems, representing a dangerous misunderstanding of basic radio principles. Clark's evaluation carried enormous weight throughout the Navy's technical community. His reputation as the developer of several radar innovations made his dismissal of Chen's theory seem definitive. Officers who might have been curious about frequency analysis abandoned interest rather than challenge Clark's expertise. The scientific establishment had spoken, and Chen's ideas were officially considered pseudoscience. Lieutenant Nakamura faced increasingly severe pressure to abandon the project. Her commanding officer delivered what amounted to an ultimatum. She was a promising officer with a brilliant future ahead, but she would destroy her career defending the fantasies of an enlisted man who was clearly out of his depth. She needed to disassociate herself from the frequency analysis nonsense immediately or face formal disciplinary action. The institutional campaign against Chen's research extended beyond official channels. Senior petty officers began spreading rumors that Chen's unauthorized experiments had caused radar malfunctions during critical operations. Stories circulated that his prototype device had interfered with navigation systems, potentially endangering the Enterprise during a recent storm. Although these claims were unsubstantiated, they created a toxic environment where association with Chen's project became career suicide. Chen found himself increasingly isolated aboard the Enterprise. Fellow electronics specialists avoided him during meals and refused to discuss technical matters in his presence. His requests for equipment and laboratory time were denied without explanation. Even basic maintenance duties were reassigned to other personnel, effectively excluding him from meaningful participation in the ship's operations. The breaking point came when Chen discovered that his prototype frequency analyzer had been confiscated during a routine inspection. Lieutenant Commander Phillips informed him that the device had been destroyed as unauthorized modification of military equipment, and that any future attempts to construct similar apparatus would result in court-martial proceedings for insubordination and destruction of government property. Chen's breakthrough came from an unexpected source: captured Japanese technical documents recovered from a downed submarine near Bougainville. Lieutenant Nakamura, working in the Enterprise's intelligence section, noticed references to Kitsune Hikari, or Fox lights, in intercepted communications. The documents, partially damaged by seawater, contained fragments of technical specifications that matched Chen's theoretical descriptions of underwater electromagnetic pulse generator. Nakamura showed Chen the translated documents in a secluded corner of the communications center. The Japanese technical manual described precisely what Chen had theorized: coordinated underwater strobe systems designed to create false electromagnetic signatures on enemy radar. The manual even included frequency specifications that explained why Chen's early prototypes had failed. He'd been analyzing the wrong wavelengths entirely. The captured documents revealed that Operation Kitsune used 3 distinct frequency bands simultaneously, creating complex interference patterns that mimicked ship movements. Japanese engineers had spent months perfecting the synchronization timing to make phantom contacts appear realistic to American radar operators. Most critically, the manual included countermeasures, specifications detailing frequency combinations that would expose the artificial nature of the signals. Working with renewed determination, Chen began constructing a new prototype based on the Japanese technical specifications. This time, he understood exactly which frequencies to monitor and how to filter the signals to reveal deception patterns. Lieutenant Nakamura provided official cover by requisitioning the necessary components through legitimate channels, describing them as communications enhancement equipment in her reports. The refined frequency analyzer was elegantly simple compared to Chen's earlier contraption. Instead of trying to monitor all radar frequencies simultaneously, the new device focused on the 3 specific wavelengths that Japanese phantom lights used to create false signatures. When genuine ships appeared on radar, all 3 frequencies showed consistent returns. When Kitsune lights activated, the frequency responses diverged dramatically, creating unmistakable deception indicators. The validation test Chen had desperately needed finally occurred during a Japanese submarine attack near Guadalcanal. Traditional radar detected what appeared to be a destroyer formation approaching the Enterprise from the northeast. Chen's frequency analyzer immediately identified the contacts as artificial, showing the telltale frequency divergence patterns described in the captured Japanese manual. Chen reported to the officer of the watch that the contacts were phantom signals, with his frequency analysis showing they were artificial electromagnetic sources rather than ships. This time, instead of dismissing Chen's warning, Lieutenant Commander Walsh decided to investigate. He ordered a reconnaissance aircraft to overfly the contact area while maintaining course away from the apparent enemy formation. The reconnaissance pilot reported empty ocean where radar showed Japanese destroyers. However, underwater explosions were visible in the area as Japanese submarines, expecting American ships to follow the phantom contacts, detonated mines prematurely. The trap had been exposed and avoided through Chen's frequency analysis, saving the Enterprise and her escort vessels from certain destruction. Word of the successful deception detection spread rapidly through the task force. Within hours, Admiral Halsey's staff was demanding detailed reports about the frequency analysis breakthrough that had exposed Japanese phantom light tactics. Chen found himself summoned to Pearl Harbor for immediate briefings with the highest levels of Pacific Fleet Command, while Lieutenant Nakamura's career was suddenly transformed from damaged to meteoric, as her support for Chen's research was now recognized as scientific vision that had potentially saved the Pacific Fleet. Intelligence intercepts revealed that Japan was accelerating Operation Kitsune in response to the Enterprise's successful avoidance of their submarine trap. Admiral Yamamoto had ordered the immediate deployment of advanced phantom light networks across all major Pacific shipping lanes. Within 72 hours, Japanese forces would activate the largest naval deception operation in history, designed to systematically destroy American task forces before Chen's countermeasures could be widely implemented. Admiral Nimitz told the emergency conference at Pearl Harbor that they had a maximum of 3 days to equip their entire Pacific Fleet with frequency analysis capability. If they failed, Japan would sink half their ships before they could mount an effective response. The challenge was staggering. Chen's prototype device worked perfectly, but manufacturing hundreds of frequency analyzers for fleet-wide deployment would normally require months of production planning and testing. Dr. Harrison Clark, the Bureau of Ships engineer, who had previously dismissed Chen's theory as impossible, now faced the humiliating task of reverse engineering technology he'd claimed couldn't exist. The mathematics were actually quite elegant, Clark admitted grudgingly as he studied Chen's frequency analysis circuits. They could adapt existing radar components to create the filtering systems, but they needed simplified versions that any radar operator could use effectively. Chen found himself working 18-hour days alongside Navy engineers who had ignored him weeks earlier. The irony was lost on no one. The electronics specialist they'd tried to silence was now directing the crash program to save the Pacific Fleet. Lieutenant Nakamura coordinated the massive logistics operation, requisitioning components from every available source and organizing teams of technicians to modify radar systems across dozens of ships simultaneously. The technical challenges were overwhelming. Chen's prototype worked flawlessly on the Enterprise's specific radar configuration, but other ships used different equipment that required custom modifications. Each vessel needed individually calibrated frequency analyzers, and there was no time for proper testing. Engineers were installing untested equipment on warships heading directly into combat zones, where equipment failure meant death. Japanese phantom light networks activated across the Central Pacific as American task forces departed Pearl Harbor for planned operations in the Marshall Islands. The first test of Chen's mass-produced frequency analyzers came aboard the USS Washington, whose radar operators detected what appeared to be a Japanese carrier formation moving to intercept American forces. Traditional radar showed a massive enemy fleet approaching their position. Chen's frequency analyzer aboard the Washington immediately revealed the contacts as phantom signals, but the device's readings were ambiguous. Unlike his refined prototype, the mass-produced analyzers showed marginal frequency divergence that could indicate either Japanese deception or equipment malfunction. Radar operators faced an impossible decision: trust the untested frequency analysis and ignore apparent enemy contacts, or follow traditional radar guidance and potentially sail into a submarine trap. Captain Davis aboard the Washington chose to trust Chen's technology. Instead of pursuing the phantom contacts, he ordered evasive maneuvers away from the apparent Japanese fleet. 6 hours later, submarine periscopes were spotted in the exact area where radar had shown enemy carriers. Japanese submarines, waiting for American ships to follow the phantom signals, were forced to surface and retreat when their trap failed. But success aboard the Washington was offset by disaster elsewhere. The USS Atlanta, equipped with a malfunctioning frequency analyzer, followed traditional radar contacts directly into a Japanese submarine wolf pack, suffering severe damage and heavy casualties when the frequency analysis device showed inconclusive readings that operators interpreted as equipment failure rather than deception warning. Admiral Halsey made his decision during the largest Japanese deception operation of the war. Intelligence intercepted communications indicating that Admiral Yamamoto had activated every phantom light network simultaneously in a coordinated attempt to destroy the American task forces converging on the Marshall Islands. 37 ships equipped with Chen's frequency analyzers would face the ultimate test against Japan's most sophisticated naval deception. Chen aboard the Enterprise watched his technology undergo trial by fire as radar screens across the Pacific Fleet filled with phantom contacts. Traditional radar showed what appeared to be the entire Japanese combined fleet moving to intercept American forces in over 200 enemy ships in perfect attack formations. The frequency analyzers revealed a different story: coordinated electromagnetic pulses creating the illusion of massive enemy presence where only empty ocean existed. Chen reported to Admiral Halsey's flag bridge that frequency analysis confirmed all contacts were artificial. The Japanese were showing them their entire phantom light capability at once, but several ships reported frequency analyzer malfunctions, creating confusion about which contacts were real and which were deception. The USS Lexington's analyzer showed inconsistent readings that could indicate either equipment failure or genuine enemy vessels masked among the phantom signals. The breakthrough came when Chen realized the Japanese had made a critical error. By activating all phantom light networks simultaneously, they had created frequency interference patterns that revealed the location of their actual submarines hiding among the false contacts. The real Japanese positions were creating shadows in the phantom light matrix, he explained urgently to Admiral Halsey. Their submarines were blocking some of the artificial signals, creating gaps they could detect. Halsey immediately ordered all task force commanders to focus on the frequency analysis shadows rather than the phantom contacts themselves. Where Chen's analyzers showed gaps in the deception patterns, American forces would find genuine Japanese submarines. The hunter-killer groups deployed with unprecedented precision, using frequency analysis to distinguish between phantom lights and actual enemy vessels. The results were devastating for Japanese forces. American destroyers, guided by Chen's frequency analysis, systematically located and destroyed Japanese submarines that believed themselves invisible among the phantom light networks. The USS O'Brien sank 3 submarines in 40 minutes by following frequency analysis shadows. Task Force 58 eliminated an entire Japanese wolf pack that had been positioned to ambush American carriers. Within 12 hours, Operation Kitsune collapsed completely. Japanese submarine commanders, realizing their phantom light networks were exposing rather than concealing their positions, began emergency surface retreats. The sophisticated deception operation that was supposed to destroy the Pacific Fleet instead led Japanese forces into the most one-sided naval engagement of the Pacific War. Admiral Yamamoto's reaction, intercepted by American codebreakers, captured the magnitude of the Japanese defeat. The Americans had turned their greatest technological advantage into their greatest vulnerability. They saw through phantom lights as if they possessed supernatural vision. Japanese submarine forces were being systematically destroyed by an enemy who knew exactly where they were hiding. The strategic implications of Chen's frequency analysis breakthrough became clear as Pacific Fleet Intelligence compiled the results. In 72 hours of operations, American forces had destroyed 23 Japanese submarines while suffering 0 losses to phantom light deception. The Japanese combined fleet's most sophisticated technological advantage had been completely neutralized by a farm boy from Iowa who understood radio frequencies better than anyone realized. Dr. Harrison Clark, the Bureau of Ships engineer who had dismissed Chen's theory as impossible, arrived at Pearl Harbor to personally apologize and request detailed technical briefings. Clark admitted publicly during the post-operation conference that he was catastrophically wrong about the frequency analysis concept. Chen's understanding of electromagnetic phenomena exceeded anything their engineering teams had anticipated, and they needed to incorporate his insights into every aspect of naval radar development. The conversion of Chen's harshest critics was dramatic and immediate. Captain Morrison, who had recommended court-martial proceedings for unauthorized experiments, now requested Chen's transfer to his staff as senior electronics specialist. Lieutenant Commander Phillips, who had ordered Chen's prototype destroyed, submitted recommendations for Chen's immediate promotion and commendation for saving the Pacific Fleet from systematic destruction. Lieutenant Nakamura's vindication was equally spectacular. Her support for Chen's research, previously viewed as career-destroying poor judgment, was now recognized as the scientific vision that had prevented Japan from winning the Pacific War through technological deception. Admiral Nimitz personally commended her for recognizing Chen's potential when senior officers had dismissed his ideas as amateur speculation. The broader impact extended throughout the Pacific theater as Japanese forces abandoned phantom light operations entirely. Intelligence intercepts revealed Admiral Yamamoto's order to dismantle all Kitsune installations immediately. The Americans possessed supernatural ability to distinguish reality from illusion, read one intercepted communication. Their phantom lights now served only to reveal their positions to enemy forces. Japanese submarine commanders, demoralized by systematic defeats, began avoiding areas where American ships operated. The psychological impact of Chen's frequency analysis was as devastating as the tactical advantages. Japanese forces that had dominated Pacific waters through technological sophistication now faced enemies who could see through any deception they deployed. Within weeks, frequency analysis equipment became standard throughout the Allied Pacific Fleet. British and Australian naval forces requested immediate technology transfer to counter potential Japanese deception operations in their operational areas. The Soviet Pacific Fleet, despite political tensions with the United States, secretly acquired frequency analysis capabilities through intelligence channels. Chen found himself transformed from an ignored enlisted specialist to the Navy's most celebrated electronics innovator. His promotion to Chief Petty Officer was expedited, and he received assignment to the newly created Electronic Warfare Development Command, where his insights would shape the future of naval technology. The 23-year-old who had been threatened with court-martial was now directing research programs with budgets exceeding millions of dollars. The ultimate validation came from captured Japanese technical personnel who, when interrogated about Operation Kitsune, expressed amazement at American countermeasures. When told that a single American electronics specialist had developed the countermeasures that defeated their entire technological program, one Japanese engineer captured the magnitude of Chen's achievement with his stunned response. Impossible. Tommy Chen's frequency analysis breakthrough fundamentally transformed electronic warfare, establishing principles that remain classified and operational in modern naval systems 8 decades later. The The techniques he developed for distinguishing genuine electromagnetic signatures from artificial deception became the foundation for every radar countermeasure system deployed by NATO forces today, protecting democratic nations from technological deception. The immediate post-war impact was profound. Chen's insights led to the creation of the U.S. Navy's Electronic Warfare School, where his frequency analysis principles became required curriculum for all radar specialists. By the war's end, American electronic warfare capabilities were so advanced that no enemy deception operation succeeded against Allied forces for the remainder of World War II. The technology's evolution continued through the Cold War as Soviet forces attempted to replicate Japanese phantom light tactics using more sophisticated electronic systems. Chen, promoted to commander and assigned to the Pentagon's Electronic Warfare Division, spent the following decades developing countermeasures against increasingly complex enemy deception operations. His frequency analysis concepts adapted to counter Soviet electronic jamming, ensuring American technological superiority throughout the nuclear standoff. Modern military forces still employ variants of Chen's original frequency analysis in systems whose capabilities remain highly classified. GPS spoofing, radar jamming, and cyber warfare attacks against navigation systems all face countermeasures derived from the principles Chen developed while working with improvised equipment aboard the USS Enterprise. The farm boy from Iowa had unknowingly created the theoretical foundation for 21st century electronic warfare. Chen's personal legacy was equally remarkable. After retiring from the Navy as a Rear Admiral, he established the Chen Institute for Electronic Engineering at Iowa State University, where his research into electromagnetic phenomena continued advancing civilian technology. Satellite communications, cellular phone network, and internet infrastructure all benefited from principles Chen discovered while developing countermeasures against Japanese phantom lights. Lieutenant Sarah Nakamura, Chen's early supporter and collaborator, became the Navy's first female admiral and directed the service's transition to computer-based electronic warfare systems during the following decades. Her memoirs credited Chen's influence with teaching her that the most important military innovations often come from unexpected sources with unconventional perspectives. The broader lesson of Chen's achievement resonates powerfully in contemporary military and technological development. The most sophisticated enemy advantages can be neutralized by individuals who understand underlying principles better than anyone realizes. Modern adversaries deploying AI-powered deception, quantum encryption breaking, and hypersonic weapon guidance systems may discover that their technological superiority is vulnerable to insights from sources they never considered threatening. Chen died recently at age 99, having lived to see his frequency analysis principles incorporated into systems protecting democratic nations worldwide. His obituary, published in classified military journals, described him as the enlisted specialist whose curiosity about radio frequencies changed the course of World War II and established the foundation for modern electronic warfare. Today, as authoritarian regimes deploy increasingly sophisticated technological deception against free societies, Chen's legacy provides both inspiration and practical guidance. The next breakthrough protecting democratic values may come from an overlooked individual whose unconventional thinking sees solutions that established experts miss. The phantom lights over the Pacific were extinguished by one man's refusal to accept that impossible simply meant not yet understood.